Welcome back to Something Positive for Positive People. This is part two of Nanette's episode with Project Accept. What I wanted to do in this part two episode was talk more so about your experience as a nurse, what you've seen, how common herpes is, how having herpes has helped or hindered you in your profession, and then I want to talk about the new thing you told me about with Project Accept.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to getting all that information out for you. So, we will start with
We
when
can,
I was a nurse.
yeah, let's start there.
Since I was a nurse before I was diagnosed with genital HSV-2, and I was working labor and delivery at the time, which meant that, um, I had to watch for those babies.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was working with moms, I had to ask, pertinent questions and I had to respect privacy. And there was things that, I would just do in my routine day that once I was diagnosed, those routine questions had a little bit different perspective from me. And so I started to be a little bit more aware and I would ask more, I would ask questions in a kinder and gentler way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it did help me my with my nursing, my bedside nursing, because I understood how traumatizing it could be to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I cried every day for months. If I even thought about the word, I could have been in the grocery store, I could have been at work, I could be at home, and I would just start to cry. So I try to be as sensitive to those types of emotions with my patients as well. Um, I did move on from labor and delivery, and I went to the operating room. And there, I was working one day with a urologist, and we were doing a procedure in the operating room on a young man, and without jeopardizing any HIPAA regulations, um, as the circulator, I said, "Do you need to swab for HSV?" And he's like, "Oh, no, no, we already have the swabs. We don't need to do anymore." And from my observation, um, and everything, it was classic presentation, but I could only do so much.
Mm-hmm.
And the physician said no. And I wasn't quite good in my skin yet, so I just had to accept what the physician said and move forward. And I felt like I let down my patient that day
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't stand my ground in knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
Um, but in knowing what I know now, I also understand why the physician did what he did. Um, because in the years that I have been diagnosed, at first, I really, really relied on people who had already had the diagnosis. After my breakup from the relationship, I finally decided to, pull myself up by my bootstraps. And one night, I got on my laptop and I Googled herpes dating and, or dating with herpes or whatever. And I came up to positive singles and oh, it was dreadful, dreadful. It's because it's like an admission. Um, but I got on there, and like I said, I was a single mom. I didn't have enough money to pay the exorbitant membership fee. But because I was single, I could, but because I was on there, I could freely post in the blogs. I didn't have to join it. I didn't have to be a member to post in the blogs. And just by happenstance, somebody close by to me about 10 miles away was having a barbecue that weekend and he read my "Oh woe is me" post. And I had no idea who this person was, but by his profile, I could tell that he was either a doctor or a JD, so that is the education level. And so I was afraid that it was a doctor at the hospital that I worked at, and I was being trapped and paranoid that this person I was going to cross paths with at work, right? Because I couldn't see his face on his profile. He just had his big cowboy hat on. And so he's talking to me and says, come on, you should just come over and meet everybody. It'll be so much better. And I'm like, oh, woe is me. No, I don't think I can do this. And of course, now I'm not telling my family or my friends or anything about any of this. So this is all entirely against the grain of even online dating or new dating policy. You don't go anywhere without at least telling a friend, right? For safety reasons for women. But I did this completely on my own. I didn't tell a soul where I was going. I did decide to go eventually. And I walked up to this house and I looked around. It was in a nice neighborhood. Okay, I can deal. It had a lot of cars in front of it. Okay, so this must really be a party. But I walked up to the door and I knocked on the door and nobody answered.
So you just been pranked.
Well, like I was like I was gonna beat back to my car and be like, I shouldn't be here, but I could hear music and I could hear people laughing. I'm like, okay, if you don't do this, what are you gonna do? Gonna go home and cry? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So I pounded on the door one more time, and what happened? Nothing. No. Somebody yells, come in! And I'm like, oh, shit. Now, not only is nobody coming to the door, I have to open it. So, what did I do?
I hope you opened the door.
At this point, what do I have to lose, right? Because I'm already as low as I could be. I opened a door, and I went on in. And I met some really wonderful people. And, sometimes I always say safety first, but you have to go with your gut sometimes. And I went with my gut this time, and my gut said that I was going to be safe and okay. Mm-hmm. So I went with my gut. As nervous as I was, my gut said I was going to be okay, and I was. And I met some wonderful people who introduced me to a website called HWorks. Mm-hmm. There was another site at the same time called MPWH.
Real quick, so you said that the guy that you met on Positive Singles who was having the barbecue, or who told you about the barbecue, was in the medical field as well, right?
Yes, it turned out he was a veterinarian.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't have to worry about finding him work, but that was my paranoia. Thank you for readdressing that.
Yeah, is that a concern?
We look at these little details,
Is that a concern, having herpes and working in the medical profession?
Yes. I've come across a few people that I work with who have found me on various ways to get in touch with me with regard to their diagnosis. And they're like, oh, I hope she doesn't work with me. I hope she doesn't work with me. And sure enough, we do. We work at the same hospital. But again, my confidentiality stays with me. What I know about somebody else's HSV status stays with me without permission. I don't disclose to anybody else without somebody's permission. So,
I know that there are people who fear others finding out they have herpes because of their profession, and it's probably not just the medical field. Business owners who just don't want to be embarrassed by the fact that they have herpes and risk losing clients. Is that a thing where you can be fired for having herpes?
I've heard of some people reporting that they have been fired because they have had herpes, or they haven't been offered a job position because of their diagnosis. I personally have not experienced that. Mm-hmm. The location, when I was diagnosed, the hospital that I worked at, we did have a contagious diseases clause, but it said so long as it was visible and you had to stay home, during an outbreak. And they were talking more about the face. And now I worked, again, labor and delivery at the time, and just a little point here to make is that transmission to newborns can be fatal to a newborn. So we have to really be diligent about making sure that if we see any signs of an outbreak on the new mom in during labor, or any of our staff, we need to make sure that we bring that to the attention, because we do not want anybody to bring HSV to a newborn.
Right. All right. So after the barbecue, you met all these friends. You met great people. You pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone, and you don't regret it at all.
Oh, no, no, not at all. Going to that barbecue changed my life. Um, I was surrounded by a variety of people.
Oh yeah.
I met um, I met kind of normal people. I met very well educated people. I met funny people. I met happy people.
Yes.
And that was the key because I don't think I had laughed in months.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
I had nothing to laugh about. And when I got on HWorks, at the time, their chat room allowed for video chat. So I would get on there, and my computer screen looked like Hollywood Squares because all these folks would cam up. Now I was too chicken to cam up because, like, I'm an introvert to begin with,
You
so
just
it was really
watched.
hard for me already. But I would watch and I would listen, and then they would kind of bring me into the conversation, and so then I finally started talking
Mm-hmm.
and interacting, and I was still in my angry stage, and these folks were very supportive, and some of them gave me some tough love, man. Some of them told me like it was straight up to get over it and move forward, that it was not a big deal, and others were, very a little bit more sensitive and
Yeah.
coddling, which you kind of need a little bit of a combination to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so after a few months of this, and I learned about private events that were happening all over the country every so often, like once a year. And I learned about support meetings in my local area. Now, granted, I was 2 hours outside of DC, so I really didn't want to drive 2 hours to the support meeting, but I did drive, 10 miles to that barbecue. And so I started with the barbecue. Those people that I met there, they were on HWorks as well. I kept in contact with them. They kept in contact with me. They told two friends and introduced me. So it was kind of like this little network of folks. And um, one year there was an event that people were going to, and I felt so much better that I decided I wanted to go to this event and thank the people that I had seen on my little computer screen. I wanted to thank them in person to let them know that their support and their words made a difference to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I journeyed 3 states away, four states away, um, to Middle America, and I met about 70 people, and we had a great time at this hotel. We big pool party, lunch, and just camaraderie, and it was happy and smiling and laughs and stories and tears, and it was just cathartic,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to tell them thank you. And so I came home after this event. And of course, I had taken pictures. Well, let me rephrase this. As an introvert, I don't like my picture taken. But you can choose. You can either have your picture taken or let people know that you don't want your picture taken. Well, I wasn't comfortable with it, but I felt included. And that was something huge because when the stigma of herpes grabs a hold of you, you think you're alone. So again, jumping outside my box, I jumped into some pictures, or people would jump into pictures and want to have a picture with me, which made me feel good.
Oh yeah, you love
So,
that.
right? It was like, oh, I don't like that picture of me, but oh, somebody wanted to have their picture with me, so it made me feel good, right? So I get back, and we get back up on the HWorks, and we're chatting in the chat room, and I'm just, really um, elated about
Engaged.
my newfound friends,
Uh,
and how in much better mindset and place that I am. And one of those friends, which I had met it actually at the barbecue, um, talked me into getting on Facebook. And I was like, no, I really don't want to be on Facebook. That I just wasn't interested. Well, finally, she talked me into it, and I made a profile on Facebook, and I had a few friends from the age community that were on there, and then, but I also had a couple of work friends, I guess, or maybe I didn't. I honestly don't remember. Um, but one morning, it was in October, and the only reason I know it was in October is because it was a few days after my birthday. And I signed on to Facebook, and it had a promotion about this new feature called groups. And with after this event and the pictures, I had posted them on my page a week before. I had somebody, two people actually, contact me and say, "Take my picture off your page because somebody's going to find out."
Yeah.
And I'm like, how would somebody find out why you and I are friends? It doesn't make sense, but
Mm.
okay. So I untagged them because that's respectable. But I'm like, why do I need to take the picture down? Okay. And this group thing, I could put whoever I wanted to in it, and we could
Yes.
post whatever we wanted to.
Yes.
And wasn't this a really cool thing?
Yep.
So I started this group, and I put about 30 people in. The only 30 people that I knew, because it was just months after I had been to this event. And I put these folks in, and I said, okay, you can only be in this group if you have herpes, period. And nobody could see it. You know, we went through the, oh my goodness, they're going to see me if I post this, and they're going to see me. No, we went through all of that, and we found that it was totally secret. You couldn't find it on Facebook if you searched for it. The only way that you could get in it was by knowing somebody who was in it, and they added you. So this group that started with about 30 people started to exponentially grow. And OMG, I was sitting back going, what have I done? Because I didn't know all these people, but yet they told two friends, and so on and so on and so on. And so all of a sudden, there's this big, huge group with 1,000 people in it. And I'm like,
Mm.
whoa, where'd those all come from? I don't know everybody. And it was so fun. It was very organic, and it was fun, and everybody was kind of like a family in there and picking on each other. And this thing, it was like carrying over from the H work chat room, but it was everybody could do it at the same time. You could have more than, one or two people chatting. And I don't know why it took off, but it did. And then the next thing I know, there's so many people. And then I have people saying, "Hey, well, do you have a group for this or do you have a group for that?" I'm like, "No, I only have this one."
Yeah.
you know. And then the socialization started to take um, precedence, and some of the support of the questions about HSV and herpes were getting lost
Mm.
because of the way Facebook's not newsfeed, but the group feed was. And so somebody decided to branch out and create a support group. And somebody else decided that they wanted to make a ladies group. And somebody else decided that they wanted to take their Yahoo group from their town and make a Facebook group for their town too. And so it just kind of organically snowballed
Yeah.
into this network of of groups, and it got to be, with any community, the bigger it is, sometimes the more problems there is, and sometimes there are people that are there for purposes other than, and sometimes you're making a difference in somebody's life. And that group saved lives, I know for a fact, because we actually used the group to save a life. Somebody posted something that was of concern, an admin intervened and privately got the information that we needed, and we were able to get the proper people in the proper place and get that person help.
Yeah.
So we know it saved a life. On more than one occasion, I know it did.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm sure it has because that's one of the reasons that this podcast was started was just because me saying having herpes isn't all that bad to a woman who is contemplating suicide isn't enough. It's we need to hear more from people like you, like myself, like other guests that we've had on the podcast to know, hey, this is common. You go on, you live a life, you have a career, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. The only difference is like now you have herpes. Nothing else has changed.
correct. But it took me many years to come to that.
But you had to get around people. You had to get around
Yes.
the right kinds of people. People who were going to be supportive. People who were going to be who understood. You needed to be around empathetic people or understanding people who weren't judgmental. And I know I hear it from a lot of people how grateful they are for herpes after time, like after you've had time and experiences, when you get around people who have all these different perspectives and sets of experiences around you for conversation, for support, for, I mean, even dating. You know, you find yourself getting out of your comfort zone and being around so many different types of people is really where that growth comes from, that development, that newfound perspective. You find yourself doing things, you become more open minded to other things and dating
Absolutely.
other races, cultures, ages.
Well, you brought up a good point, and I wanted to hit home on that because that was a very poignant turn in my journey. I mentioned these events, and there was a Christmas party here in my area, and some people from out of state came to that party, and I'm like, well, what'd they come here for? You know, I didn't quite grasp the concept. I was like, this is our Christmas party. Why'd they come here? Well, I found myself sitting in my apartment 2 weeks later with nothing else to do for the entire weekend, going, their party is this weekend. I can drive it. I can be there in about 10 hours. I could go. They came here. Why wouldn't I want to go there? And so I did. And I went to this party, and this is a group that is very historically active group in a very large city. So the holiday party that in their town was very well attended, and I had the opportunity to be at a vantage point of looking down on the party from above on a loft area, and I had an epiphany. And I had been working wandering through the crowd, talking to people I knew, meeting others I didn't know. And while I was up on the loft, I looked down and I said, no one in this room can hate me or judge me for having herpes. Now, there's people here I like, and there's people here I really am not as fond of, but it has nothing to do with having herpes. It's normal life,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I felt it was like that was kind of like my point of starting to feel normal again.
Yeah.
Was I was able to take that epiphany and go, yeah, not everybody judges me for something I know, but they don't know. And then when I do know, they still may or may not like me. It has nothing to do with
Yeah.
herpes.
And I mean,
you know?
you don't appreciate what you see in front of you until you can't see. So like you get mud thrown in your eyes and then when you clean it out, you're like, "Oh shit, I can see again." And like
Yes,
that's kind of how that works. So herpes essentially was dirt. You get dirt in your eyes every now and then you got to wipe it out and more so be appreciative of what's in front of you.
exactly. Um, so so yes, that event was a definite turning point for me, as well as the other events that I ended up going to many events for the next 2 years. Plus, the group was growing, and then there were many more groups. And then I was able to see what was going on in other places. And me, I like to travel.
Yeah.
So,
You
oh,
had a
look,
reason
I
to
want to
travel.
travel to somewhere. Let's see what's going on. I've got a network already here, and I can go here and I can see so and so and so and so and such, and we can get
Yeah.
together and we can have a little social time. and it became a wonderful thing for me. It was my outlet
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't dating. I was afraid to date, and so therefore I just hung out with my friends, and I had these newfound friends, and I was content, and I wasn't dwelling on the fact that I had HSV.
Yeah.
So it was a very good time for me just to kind of live free, not pay attention to it, and move forward.
Yeah, we need those good times.
Yes, and but with those good times, of course, came conversations about HSV. And in the groups, whichever group it was, it could be any of the groups, um, or any of the events. When you have somebody who's brand new that comes to an event that's still a little overwhelmed or something, you kind of take them off to the side and let them talk their story and share with you how they're feeling, and then you're there for them, and then you kind of bring them into the fold. That was one thing about the events, was that if you were new, you weren't left in a corner. Whenever I
Yeah.
went to an event, even some of the events even had name tags that were indicated of whether or not this was your first event.
Okay.
So if say it was my first event, I had a blue name tag, and somebody else was an administrator, organizer of the event, theirs was red, and just an attendee that had been there before was green.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that easy to identify people to help them bring them in. So if they saw somebody
Yeah.
with a red name tag sitting off in the corner, a green or a blue would come over and say, "Hey, who are you? How are you? Can I help you?" So it was very reassuring. I never felt alone.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt like I was lonely
You
when
felt
I was at
included,
an
just
event.
like you said.
I felt
When taking the pictures or having your picture taken, you were included.
exactly. You
Yeah.
were part of something and not alone. And what does the stigma do? The stigma makes you think you feel like you're all alone and nobody else has this, and you're left to deal with it all on your own. And
Yeah.
that's not the case at
It's
all.
someone I had on the podcast even said that they were like, herpes wants you to think you're alone because when you're ashamed, embarrassed, and alone, that's when it has the opportunity to spread. We're stressed, we think we're the only ones dealing with it, we probably shame ourselves, don't take medication, and bam, now we can have an outbreak. And now when you're not disclosing or telling people, you're able to spread it, and now it's getting what it wants by us being ashamed of it, being embarrassed by it, not feeling like we can openly and honestly communicate about our status. It does all of those things. That's what herpes wants. And the only way to combat that is to be at a place where it's not a shameful thing anymore.
Yes, exactly. And these events and this network gave me the strength to start to stand on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went through what I call the coming out phase.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of compare my journey to
Like coming out of the
someone.
closet.
Absolutely, I was paying it forward
Mm-hmm.
because of those who had been there for me. And so, probably about 2012 was about two years into the groups and the events, and I crossed paths with a man named Christian Fashab. So Christian somehow was added to my group, and we got to talking, and I found um, that he had some ideas that were very similar to mine. Um, during the evolution of the community network on Facebook, through all the groups, there was a lot of misinformation, bad information. People were coming into the support group saying what their doctor told them, which was flat out lies. And as a nurse, I was embarrassed by some of the just flat out horrible education that these people were getting from their doctors. And it made me ashamed to be part of the healthcare community.
Yeah.
So I digress for just a moment, but So I crossed paths with Christian, and he had an idea that I was very interested in. He wanted to start a nonprofit that started to bring more current education and information to the public. And he named it projectaccept.org. And the more I read about it and the more I talked to him, and we talked for hours because I really wanted to know more about this. It really it spoke to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to know more. So I kept digging and digging and digging. And finally, a few of us came together and we took this concept and we made it a reality. And we brought it to the state. I talked to Christian about the process of bringing the business to being an entity. And so we started here in my state, and we got a Virginia non-stock corporation put in place. And then, and while we were doing the backside of things, we were also very forefront in the community, trying to get out and be more active and have activism type events. And one of these things that a lady that is known in the community had an idea. Her idea, she wanted to do a walk for H. And unfortunately, for reasons we were in the process of organizing it. She had started it. She had to step down. So when she stepped down, we stepped up, and in her honor, we went ahead with the plans to have the first Walk for H. And it was organized in Chicago, and it was in conjunction with the Rock and Roll Marathon in June of, I want to say 2012. Right now, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was in June, and we had 7 people show up, and we wore shirts, and we got out there and we handed out flyers, and we walked the 10K, 5K, sorry, the 5K portion of the Rock and Roll Marathon. And that was our first Walk for H. And we did 3 of those. All the while, we're putting in for the IRS nonprofit delegation as a 501c3. So we're doing our activism and we're putting our paperwork together so that we can get this delegation so that those who do donate to our organization are able to use it as a tax write-off. So we went ahead and we just kept doing what we were doing, and the IRS did approve our application, and that was in January of 2013. So we have been a nonprofit organization since June of 2000, or I'm sorry, August 2012, officially by the State Corporation Commission. But that was after our first Walk for H.
Give us an overview of what Project Accept is and does, real quick.
The mission is to get out there and get not only the healthcare community, but the public and those who have HSV on the same page to get awareness, education, and get rid of all the miscommunication, all of the misinformation, all of the half-truths, all of the statistics that, there's 1 in 5, there's 1 in 4, there's 1 in 7. What is really the truth?
Yes.
And so we put about to put that information out there to see if we could bring people from the healthcare community, the research community, together to bring about the most current information to the public.
Okay.
Because we want to dispel the stigma and put the reality out there.
Oh yeah. It's hard to take something serious when there's so many inconsistencies, like 1 in 4, 1 in 6, 1 in 7.
Correct. And during the process of the early years of Project Accept, I was in contact with a friend of mine who networked with the CDC. So when she came to me, she said, I know you're working on this. Maybe this person could help. We wrote to the CDC and said, okay, your page, such and such, has 16.2% of the adult population has genital herpes. But on this page, your statement says 16.2% of the adult population has HSV-2. So we have these two things going on, but what we are seeing in the groups, me and Christian others, we're seeing all of these people coming in being diagnosed with genital HSV-1. So where does that play into either one of those statistics?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't. But yet we have group leaders that are not research inclined, so they're going by what the CDC posts. Well, guess what? The CDC is wrong.
Right.
It's not posting the correct information.
So there's no one to basically check the CDC.
Right. So we contacted the CDC and said, hey, we have all this going on, and we see this and we see this. We can't have these two things being the same when we have this HSV-1 genital being so prevalent these days, and the diagnosis is coming out. So therefore, we need you, the CDC, to do something to let people know that it's not just HSV-2 that causes genital herpes, because we know better.
Right.
And these people that are running these groups are singing your tune, but your tune is wrong.
Yeah.
So they didn't change it as much as we had hoped, but they did change it to make it more consistent.
Good.
So
at least there's
16.2%
consistency.
is genital HSV-2, not genital herpes. So there is a clinical delineation there.
Got it. So the terminology is more accurate, and we're looking at more consistency, and that's what you guys are working on, is to establish that consistent, accurate information across the board.
Correct. We want consistency, we want accuracy, and we want reality.
Ooh, that's a good one. Consistency, accuracy, reality. I like it. So we're at a good place to wrap this up. You mentioned to me that there was something exciting and new going on with ProjectAccept.org that you recently talked about.
Yes. Just this month, we are partnering with Imagine Life Coaching and Katarina Barger, who is a life coach that has been with my group since just about the beginning. And we are partnering to do Tuesday support sessions online, where you can join the support meeting. You can come in, talk to us face to face. You can talk to us about your questions, your concerns, your own personal story. And I will be addressing more of the clinical information, and Katarina will be focusing more on the emotional and life journey portion of the story. So you'll have the two of us right there for you, one-on-one. Not one-on-one. We're going to be a small group.
Tag teaming.
That's right. We're going to be tag teaming. But so it's just a small group environment. So folks that need a little bit more personalized services, one-on-one type, there will be that option available as well. But for right now, we have started on Tuesday mornings, small group, and Tuesday evenings, a little bit larger group. And for the month of April, that Tuesday evening slot, the fee will be waived. Okay. So anybody who would like to come try it Tuesday evening, we have the link set up and the registration forms set up on projectaccept.org.
All right, and I'll link to Project Accept and see if we can get a link that takes people directly to that page so that they can attend the support meeting. I'm excited for you guys because that is very, very helpful. Just as the community events and being around like situationed people, and then finding your like-minded people within that group really helps with recovering from the trauma of a diagnosis of herpes and having to deal with the stigma. So for you guys to be especially addressing the emotional aspect of what's happening in your life around the fact that you have herpes. I think that that's so important because due to the stigma, we blame everything on herpes. I see it consistently that people won't address the things that need to be addressed. They address herpes because it's there, it's not going away, it's incurable, and it's just easier to point the finger at something else rather than looking at, okay, I don't do well with stress. I have my mom and dad issues. I allow people to walk all over me, whatever the situation may be. No one wants to point the finger at themselves. They want to point it externally. And it's just easier to get out of that habit once you are able to talk to someone who understands and is able to help you get into that way of thinking.
Absolutely. I often call it the herpes scapegoat.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's the
It really is.
scapegoat, and I've used it oftentimes early on in my diagnosis. And honestly, I'm 6 years in, and I would say that I've probably done that even up until very recently, prior to starting the podcast and getting to the point where I was speaking to so many other people who I've had similar experiences with, and I'm able to say, "Oh my God, I can relate to that." Like even with your story on the last episode, there were many times where I was sitting here thinking, "Oh my God, me too." I am appreciative of what you and Katarina are doing, and I'll be sure to do what I can to get people to come and check it out because these are very, very useful, and I'll push it as best I can.
Well, thank you, Courtney, and I do appreciate everything that you're doing as well. Because another thing that Project Accept, we say together we can make a difference. And I would like us to come together, those of us who are willing to step up and step out, because there are so many that are so afraid to step up and step out, that those of us who are willing to come together to step up and step out, we do make a difference. I have seen a change in the last 10 years through all the groups. Now, granted, not everyone and not all the time, but I have seen changes, and I think that we are going in the right direction.
Yeah.
So if we all continue to work our work and work our path, I think that the folks that are coming down the path, I have a daughter who's 21, I have a daughter who's 30. They refer their friends to me. So the more we talk about it normally,
Yeah.
the better
Yeah,
that
the
are
better
coming behind
prepared
us are
people
going to have.
are. And
Absolutely,
it,
absolutely.
and I use this analogy. It's not perfect by any means of just being a lighthouse and how it took for someone who was open about their own condition and just kind of being there and looking out for people who may not know about the resources available, the groups, the dating sites, the support that's out there. I was in the dark about it until I got glimpses. Someone reached out to me and brought me to the point that they were at so that I could do the same thing. So this stuff helps. It's helped me over the last 6 years. And granted, I didn't find any of these resources until 5 years in.
I've
If
had people say that with 20 years in.
Yeah, so
So
just
there
imagine
was no
what these
internet
people.
when I was diagnosed.
Yeah,
There's a good clinical lineage to it as well, but we didn't get a chance to get into that. But that's okay. But we're here today and we're moving forward, and we need to get that information out there to folks so that they can get the support and the resources they need in order to move forward, not have to use it as a scapegoat, and just have a well-rounded life and
yeah,
not dwell.
yeah. We're not just raising awareness here, we're inspiring action.
Exactly, exactly. So thank you very much for what you're doing as well. I really, really appreciate it. And for anyone who is interested and needs to reach out for the community, Project Accept also has a link to the community because, like I said, it is a secret network um, that you can't find on Facebook unless you know someone. You can go to projectaccept.org/community, or any of the ones where you can say join us. You'll see that on the website occasionally as well. on some of the different pages. So you can fill out that form. Our intake coordinator will match up to your needs and get you pointed in the right direction. For those that are not so concerned, Project Accept also has a closed secret group which is searchable on Facebook. So all you have to do is search HSV/herpes and our support group by Project Accept will come up.
And thank you for the compliment, and thank you for what you guys are doing.
Likewise, thank you.
All right. That concludes this two-part episode of Something Positive for Positive People with Nanette from Project Accept. I'll link in the show notes how you can find that support group meeting and where you can find more information about Project Accept and what they're doing. Again, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, and Reddit at H on my chest. For anyone who is, like I said earlier, afraid of following and being associated with the podcast, you can just follow the hashtag Something Positive for Positive People and check in every now and then. Until next time, stay positive.